Don't listen to this writing advice. Hello everyone and welcome to the Reulerverse. I'm Renee Rule, and we are going to be doing a particularly chaotic video today, where I react to some of the worst writing advice Reddit has to offer. Because while the platform has a lot of good information, and I feel like does have some good writing advice, there's also stuff that's not so good. So I found this page that is quite frankly really hilarious. The person who started it said, "Worst writing advice you've ever received," and go. Theirs is, the worst characters are reflections of yourself. You need to invent wholly new characters completely removed from your personality. Oh, we've got a really bad one right from the start. So this advice actually sounds good, and it sounds like the person who said it is saying it from the heart and is saying it from a good place. But the reality is we pull stories from our own experiences. And the stuff we can write the best is often the stuff that we know the best. And in my experience, it is nearly impossible not to put at least part of yourself into your characters. And not just into the main character, into all of them. It's how you connect with them. And there is nothing wrong with that. Just make sure that your character is not a carbon copy of yourself. Give them some different hobbies, some different wants and needs, maybe a different appearance than your own. And then you're good. So our next one, don't read any books in the genre you want to write because they'll influence you too much. Wow, really? Somebody said that to this person? Obviously, you want to do the complete opposite of this. If you are writing in a specific genre, especially something that is super specialized like sci-fi, fantasy, historical, stuff that requires a lot of world building and research, you absolutely need to read in that genre. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's expected of your story. And that's just the honest truth. I don't know what else to say about that. We got another one here. Writing in past tense is so old-fashioned. You should write in present tense or no one is ever going to read your stuff 5 years from now. Okay, with this one, little bit biased, I am. I'm one of those few authors who does write in present tense, but it's not for the reasons stated in this little post. It's because I want my reader to feel like they're in the moment with the main characters, that they're living what they're living, and that they too, like the characters, aren't sure what's going to happen next. However, there is nothing wrong with writing in past tense. In fact, past tense is a lot easier to write in because there are many more adjectives that you can use. And also, if somebody reads something that's in past tense, trust me, they're still going to be hooked, they're still going to be interested in the story. The majority of famous authors wrote their books in past tense. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's not a problem at all. This next one right here kind of hits me hard because I actually used to believe in this advice. It says, if it's hard for you to write, it's hard for the reader to read. Yikes. He told us, professor to students, that writing should be easy, and if we struggled at all in the process, then it would come across that way and we shouldn't write anything. It really made me put off writing for years. Yeah, this one I struggled with too. Let me tell you exactly why this type of advice is so harmful and why it is not true. Writing something is completely different from reading something. Just like filming a video and creating content is completely different from consuming it on YouTube. A video that you have had a lot of fun watching probably took that creator a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to create. Now, if you write something and then you're reading it to yourself and you hate it, that's a bit of a different issue. But if you're having trouble motivating yourself to write and you're thinking, oh, well, it's because it's not something I actually want to write, that's not true. Oftentimes, you need to force yourself to write. You need to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write X amount of words today, and I'm not getting up from this seat until I do. And some days you're going to really enjoy it. Other days it's going to be very painful. But once that final product is created and you read it back and you have that jittery feeling in your chest where you feel so proud of yourself, if you feel like it's worth it then you're doing it right. All right, next one. I had a teacher once tell me to boost my credibility as a writer by using bigger words and fancy syntax. We even got a list of synonyms from a thesaurus and a rolled dice to pick which word to use. Now this one is very interesting, because on the one hand I can understand where the professor is coming from, but on the other, you really gotta consider target audience here. If you are writing a scientific research paper, sure, go all out with the big terms, that's kind of what that genre is known for. But if you are writing fiction for a more generalized audience, especially for younger audiences, you actually want to dumb down the vocabulary a bit. A lot of times with the sentences, simpler is better. It gets the point across better. At the end of the day, you want your reader to understand what you're saying. And no, just because something sounds fancy doesn't mean people are going to want to read it. People are going to want to read something that is interesting, that is fun to read. All right, this one says the best and worst advice is write every day and schedule your writing. On some days this works really well, on other days I want to crawl into a hole. Now this one is a little subjective, but I personally am totally against pushing the write everyday advice. It's just kind of harmful and makes people put too much pressure on themselves to write on days when they either don't have time or are too exhausted to. Instead, and I say this in my creating a writing schedule video, write when you can. Make yourself a consistent schedule, but write when you're able to. For example, for me, I actually write only 3 days a week, but when I do, I will sit down and write for 3 to 4 hours. And that works for me. And conversely, you need to find what works for you. Said is dead. Very simple one here. I actually went over this one in my worst writing advice tier list video, and I still think it's just as bad now as it was then. If you don't know what said is dead means, it basically means don't use the word said with dialogue tags because it's gotten old and you need to use more descriptive dialogue tags to talk about what the characters are doing. Like replied, demanded, remarked. While those descriptive dialogue tags can be helpful, and I gotta admit, I use them a lot myself, I'd say said is even more helpful. And that is because it goes right over the reader's head. If you just want a reader to know that a character has said something, but you don't want to put a lot of attention to it, then you say said, because the reader will then focus more on the dialogue, what the character is saying, rather than the dialogue tag. And this helps them not get something called reader fatigue, where they get too bored or overwhelmed with the structure of the passage and they don't want to read anymore. We don't want that. We want to keep engagement. And finally, this is the last one we're going to react to today. This hobbyist author says, let the characters write themselves. I have actually had people in my comments section say things like this. And again, they're coming from a good place, but it confuses me every time. Because in my experience, if you let a character write themselves, do whatever you think they would do in that moment, they're gonna end up inconsistent throughout the narrative. Instead, you want to go into the narrative with a goal in mind for where you want the character to be at the end. And make sure that you're doing everything you can to get them to that end goal, to that final point of their development. The whole, if you just write, your characters will write themselves, it'll develop as it goes along, that's a myth. And having a plan for them will help you save a lot of time revising and fixing things down the line. But that is it for our little reaction video today. I hope you guys learned something from this, and I actually had a ton of fun making this video. So if you want to see a part 2, please give this a like and let me know down below. I am certainly open to doing this again. In the meantime though, I hope I've inspired you, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey, Reulerverse Avatar here. If you enjoyed this content, you will love these videos. And if you would like to listen to some well-written, incredible stories for free, my audiobook podcast is up on the channel right now. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.